Welcome to our first full panel of this conference. My name is Shparberg, and I'm the subject librarian for religion at the Fondren Library, and so I have worked closely with Jeff and Amanda and the graduate students for several years to prepare this conference. And first of all, I wanted to thank Amanda Focke very much for this introduction to our collection. Even though the archives have already been available to researchers, but with this, with the opening of the conference, the morning of the first full day of the conference, it's only appropriate that it was dedicated to showing what we have and introducing our collection to the world so that now it can be said to be officially open for scholars. Yes. And so, you know that not every institution will be courageous enough, have enough institutional support, garner enough institutional will to collect materials which kind of skirt the boundaries of what this society we live in considers reality, the permissible, the possible. But even though we are uncommon in what we do, we're far from unique, I'm happy to say. And here on the stage, I present 4 panelists who come from different institutions which have dedicated their archival collections partially or even fully to the paranormal, to the impossible, to the supernatural. And we will be talking about terminology very much in this conference and also in this panel. And so our panelists come from the United States and from abroad. They come from public collections, they come from private collections. They're here in person, and one of them is remote. So we have a great variety of offerings here. And so without further ado, let me introduce our first panelist. There will be 4 presentations, each of them about 8 minutes long, describing these collections and their holdings, and then there will be a discussion. And you will have the opportunity to ask questions at this time. So without further ado, here's Blynne Olivieri, our first panelist. And Blynne is the associate professor at the University of West Georgia, where she leads the Special Collections Department in the Ingram Library. Blynne has been at the University of West Georgia since 2012 and had previously served as the Pacific Northwest curator at the University of Washington Libraries. She is active professionally in the ALA, American Library Association, the Society of Georgia Archivists, and the Association of Centers for the Study of Congress. And Blynne was a senior fellow at UCLA's Graduate School of Education and Information Studies in 2016 and was University of West Georgia's Faculty Member of the Year in 2019. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Blynne Olivieri.
Good morning, y'all. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here. I feel so great being in a room with folks so we can talk about these types of materials. At the University of West Georgia, we are a doctoral granting public university nestled outside of the immediate Atlanta perimeter, so definitely in the Atlanta metro area. Our position as a public university creates some kind of interesting context for having a collection on what was originally called parapsychology, which I've sort of rebranded into human consciousness collections. And even I see that there's a lot of limitations with that because we're not necessarily talking about purely human consciousness either. It's really should almost more broadly be consciousness collections, but we're trying to choose terminology that at least attempts to describe the materials. What you see in that slide there is our research room. We have a lot of other collections that I administer in special collections, including university archives, extensive political collections and congressional collections, including the fact that I administer Newt Gingrich's papers and the papers of Bob Barr. It's an interesting juxtaposition, and I want to reassure you all that a lot of the interest, both in our search hits on our finding aids, as well as our reference questions, our human consciousness collections actually beat Gingrich. But heavily used collections, including regional archives and our university archives. We hold rare books, rare maps, and archival materials. So in our human consciousness collections, we have exceptionally strong and deep holdings for print and serials, including materials that are published in different languages. And I think probably, according to OCLC, which is kind of an international catalog, probably one of the best holdings of international serials on sort of parapsychology, paranormal, probably. I think we have exceptionally strong holdings in that. And our archival collections. You can turn that. Our collections, when I arrived in 2012, our human consciousness collections, they're then called parapsychology collections, were really built out of our university's academic focus in humanist psychology and parapsychology. So really built out of that psychology disciplinary focus. And so one of the major collections that we began with were the papers of William G. Roll, who was worked at the Rhine and whose focus was primarily psychokinesis, so PK. And out of that, I saw an opportunity to really build collections because a lot of universities at that time really weren't collecting in this area. And so topically, out of that, sort of expanding into Psi and more PK stuff. And so I'm so sorry.
Back?
Okay. So topically, we tend to focus on psychokinesis, remote viewing. We have a lot of materials about ESP and other Psi phenomenon. We have exceptional collections on near-death experiences because we hold the papers of Kenneth Ring. Kenneth Ring also did some studies that sort of looked at the comparison and intersection of near-death experiences and UFO alien encounters. So we have some materials in there as well. Out-of-body experiences, a new collection that we just acquired actually this month, and we're already working our way towards processing, is the Carlos S. Alvarado papers. And cosmic art that has ended up being quite a heavily used aspect of our collections, particularly because in Ingo Svann's papers, there's a lot about cosmic art because he finished up on a project by Dr. Raymond Piper, who was in philosophy at Syracuse, and Piper, his research area was really cosmic art, and these cosmic art files thus date back to when Dr. Piper started this project in the 40s and include international artists who, some of those files include original art from cosmic artists that were working all over the world that Piper was in touch with. So our cosmic art files have ended up, some of those materials have been included in, most recently, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We're just getting ready to loan out some of our materials to Camden Art Centre in London. We've loaned materials out to the American Visionary Art Museum in Baltimore, etc. Definitely heavy on astrology. And if we could step back.
Step back, yes.
Yep, to our list of collections. I also want to just briefly touch on, we have Stanley Krippner's files, 87 boxes that are his topical files. That also include people's names, so you'll find files on both by name, like Rogo, Scott Rogo, to topical files like shamanism, psychedelic drugs, etc. Those are heavily used, and outstanding archival collection from Dr. Krippner. We have Janet Lee Mitchell papers, who worked on all sorts of PK experiments, who's an outstanding scholar and practitioner in this field. Angela Thompson-Smith, who was a founding board member of IRVA. We also have an IRVA DVD collection, and many more, including a newly acquired collection that's already been processed from really an enthusiast named Philip C. Paul, who wrote book reviews. His papers include some really interesting things about UFOs because he was in the Air Force, and he sort of used his military position to try to poke and prod to see what he could get in terms of the military to disclose encounters. So there's some really interesting files there, as well as his library that was salvageable out of a mouse-ridden, still mice extant, insect-ridden, critter urine infested, humidity and mold damaged library of his very famous library. So salvaged what we could, included some materials about UFOs as well, and spiritualism, and some gaps in our collections. We have extensive print materials, as I mentioned, the David Wayne Hooks books, Bill Roll's collection, Ingo Svann's library, the Philip C. Paul library, and more. Okay. All right. Because of our academic situation, thankfully, we do a lot. We teach. I'm tenure track faculty. I teach semester-long courses. I'm part of the faculty for our graduate school as well. So I host and teach graduate students in archival practicums in special collections, which has been wonderful. Some of you in this field know Deborah Katz. She did one of her doctoral courses, archival practicums in special collections with me. We collect, we preserve, we provide public access. I do a lot of virtual reference interviews. We do exhibitions. We co-sponsor the William G. Roll Lecture Series. There's one coming up March 12th. That one is Nan Zingroni, who's the wife of Carlos Alvarado. And then we also just opened, and are after this whole COVID pandemic, the Ingo Svahn Research Fellowship. So because of our situation and the support for our collections and us as an academic unit, we're able to do quite a bit, for which I'm thankful. Finding our collections, these are some quick links to searching. The next slide includes our email address, and I am happy to meet with anyone virtually, over the phone, etc., to help guide through the collections. Thank you.
And so now let me introduce our second panelist, and this is Clas Svahn, who is an author and journalist and the board member of Archives for the Unexplained, based in Norrköping, Sweden.
Quite good.
So Clas is the chairman for the Archives for the Unexplained in Sweden, also called the AFU. AFU was founded in 1973 and today spans over 6,500 square feet and 4,000 yards of shelf capacity. Clas Svahn has been a professional journalist since 1978 and employed with Sweden's largest newspaper, Dagens Nyheter,
good enough.
since 1990. He is international director for the UFO Sweden and has been investigating reports of alleged UFOs since 1974. Clas is the author of nearly 30 books and is a frequent expert on Swedish radio and TV and lecture. and he lives outside Stockholm with his wife Anneli and his 2 grandsons. So it's up to you, Clas.
Thank you. I have compiled an 8-minute presentation on a video clip, so you will take a look at our archives from distance. I just want to say, and of course, thank Jeff and his crew for this fantastic opportunity to come here and meet with other archivists, which is fantastic, really fantastic. That what you're going to see now is the work being done since 1973, and you will see collections from more than 300 individuals and organizations all around the world. And as Jacques indicated earlier, we are the custodians. We are taking care of the legacy for those people that have spent their lives assembling the information, the paperwork. And it's a huge responsibility. So welcome to a short presentation. It may be a little hastily filmed from time to time, but welcome to AFU. AFU was founded in 1973 and is situated south of Stockholm, Sweden. And even though we are a physical archive, some of it can be accessed through our download page. AFU consists of 15 localities spanning over 7,000 square feet with a shelf capacity of nearly 4,000 yards. Much of the files and books that finds their way to AFU arrives through our staff traveling to the US, Great Britain, and many other countries. And here you can see our HQ with some of the men and women working there. Let us take a look at some of our holdings. Among the 30,000 pictures are pictures of personalities, witnesses, and people connected to UFO research. And of course, of alleged UFOs. And animals that may or may not exist. 1 million newspaper articles from all around the world. Rare books. Posters. And artwork showing observations of strange entities or craft. 60,000 UFO reports from many different countries, both civilian and from different authorities. Videos, DVDs, CDs, reel-to-reels, and cassette tapes. Much of it saved from defunct UFO groups. We also keep stamps with UFO and paranormal motifs, and models, and toys. But also much of other kind of artifacts, some connected to the paranormal, and others to UFOs. Every collection arrives at the sorting area. Here all paperwork is eventually labeled and put into acid-free boxes and catalogued. Our 4 libraries consist of 55,000 books. One of them is devoted to UFOs and connected topics. Every book is sorted by an index created by AFU called FENCode. The same goes for our paranormal library, built and expanded from a donation of 8,000 books from paranormal researcher and author Hilary Evans and his wife Mary in London. Here you will find books on ghosts and apparitions of Virgin Mary, many of them rare and from the 1800s. As well as very hard to find magazines. In library number 3, you can find books on Atlantis, ancient astronauts, conspiracy theories, and related topics. Right now also the American physicist William Corley's files of unusual natural phenomena are situated here before they will be moved into yet another locality. And also part of the late American ufologist Wendell Stevens' correspondence. In recent years, AFU has started to build a library of science fiction books, books that have influenced our views on both UFOs and the paranormal. One of our largest collections consists of 60,000 magazines from more than 60 countries, all sorted in compact mobile shelves. This local is also the home for files from Swedish UFO groups dating back 70 years. Reel-to-reel interviews with American contactees from the 1950s, George Adamski, Howard Menger, Truman Bathory, and the US Air Force Blue Book files on microfilm. One of the rooms harbors the files from the defunct Spanish UFO group, Centro de Estudios Interplanetarios, which folded after 50 years of activity. In a local next to AFU HQ, all scannings and most of the research are being made. Here you can also find the storage for AFU Shop, a shop that sells for $2,000 a month, and together with 50 Swedish donors and some foreign, pay for the bills. AFU have yet 5 more locals, most of them storage areas. Our newest facility is waiting for another 500 yards of mobile shelves. And we are always looking for more to save and to continue helping researchers all around the world. Thank you. I must just correct one statement. This locality that looked empty, the 15th one, is now filled with those shelves last week.
Thank you so much, Clas. This is just really exciting to see. Very inspiring. So, and now let's move on to Stephen Miles or Smiles Lewis, our third presenter. And Smiles has had a lifelong fascination with the anomalous. His early age proclivity of recalling his dreams and personal experiences with ESP, precognition, and dream switching solidified his interest in the paranormal. Smiles led the Austin MUFON and UFO Experiences Support and Study Groups, published a paranormal print zine, edited a local paranormal newspaper, hosted a network of paranormal websites, organized a national UFO conference, spoken to anthropologists about the transformative UFO paradigm, hosted both terrestrial and web radio talk shows, while maintaining his own paranormal web radio station since the last century, and has been podcasting since before the phrase existed. So, in 2003, Smiles founded the nonprofit Anomaly Archives in Austin, Texas. In 2017, he contributed an essay titled True UFO versus UFOs, Planetary Poltergeists and Weapons of Mass Enchantment, to the UFO anthology UFOs, Reframing the Debate. Smiles has worked in a variety of libraries his entire adult life, and currently he runs the volunteer studio of the Texas State Library and Archives Commission's Talking Book program, producing audiobooks for the blind and print disabled. So it's on to you, Smiles.
Thank you. So I just want to say how much of an honor and a pleasure it is to be here. I am not an academic. I am not a professional librarian or archivist. I am just like so many of you, people who've had experiences that led them down this path of interest in strange phenomena. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit based in Austin, Texas, as Amanda said. And that lifelong fascination has led me, as she said, to lead a local Austin MUFON chapter, the local experiencer abductee support group, and led me into discovering the 1990s alternative media zine scene, and then publishing my own zine for a time, and meeting a wealth of people who had an interest in these same subjects and were using the desktop revolution of the 90s to publish their zines. Next slide. One of those people was Austin-based West Nations. West Nations was publishing a amazing magazine called Crash Collusion that dealt with psychedelics, conspiracy, magic, UFOs, the paranormal, visionary experiences, and whatnot. And through him, I met a wealth of close friends who I still maintain connections with today. And all this time, I was becoming aware of the Archives for UFO Research, now the Archives for the Unexplained in Sweden. And that was really the greatest inspiration to undertake the mission impossible of founding a nonprofit independent archive, not associated with any university or institution. As my own personal library began to grow, as so many of you have experienced, you sometimes outpace your ability to read, and there comes that moment where you're like, well, what are these books doing besides sitting on my shelves? They could be serving so many others. West Nations, a few slides back, when he moved away, he donated his collection of material. I had been recording Mutual UFO Network local conferences and accumulating these materials. And so when he moved away and I acquired his collection, that's around the time when I finally decided to set aside other projects that were involved in the paranormal to found the nonprofit archive in 2003. This was our first location here. We literally were in the first small garage in the front there and just renovated it to accommodate our first 1,000 books and magazines and periodicals. And next slide, please. When we moved to our next location, we were gifted with our largest collection to date, and that is the personal library of rare book collector and seller, Bob Gerard, who was notorious. Some described him as the Marcel Proust of the UFO scene because he was constantly writing these little micro reviews of all the products that he was selling, these books and magazines, and he was pretty brutal in his assessment of them as he tried to sell them to you. And so we have, besides his personal collection, which is about over 2,000 books, It includes rare materials from the 1600s that aren't necessarily directly UFO or paranormal related, but it also contains a wealth of UFO material, Atlantis material, classic contactee books, and the like, and as well as a almost complete collection of his Arcturus book zine, a catazine, which was his catalog and magazine where he wrote and published these materials, as well as copies of his own self-published material, Future Man being probably his most concerted effort to explicate his views on this phenomena. And next slide, please. And just, there weren't really money, and I do want to credit Clas Svahn for that previous photo of Bob. That still is from the documentary produced by Discovery Channel, Farewell Good Brothers. That's an interesting look at the contactee movement kind of after its heyday. These are two stills of some of the other books that he published, Mice being a brief allegory about the UFO phenomena from the perspective of mice trying to understand the nature of their reality, as well as the Revolt of the Free and another title that's escaping me. Next slide, please. So we collect a number of other collections. Over the years, we've had a wide variety of people, both experiencers and researchers, donate their materials to us. Some are just actually our attempts at collecting other people's works independently. This experiencer, Josie Gallant, was a local abductee, contactee experiencer. She was also quite the artist. She produced a number of works, that some of which are available online. And so we've collected materials like when her art, like that middle drawing was from a video that appeared on local Austin Access Television. There was some didgeridoo in the background that I believe was produced by another experiencer who donated their collection. And she had quite an extensive website. So besides the books and the correspondence of people that we're collecting, we're also trying to do, as has been described, collect digital collections, artifacts, and other ephemera that make up the world of the researchers and experiencers exploring these realities. Two other donated collections include that of Dennis Stacy, who wrote for Omni Magazine, was also for a time the editor of the MUFON UFO Journal, who also wrote articles on the UFO subject, including for the then current 1947 to 1957 book. And his collection includes a lot of correspondence as well. Also, a researcher on the West Texas Marfa Lights, a former aerospace engineer, James Bunnell. He's donated some of his personal library, and they're examples of researchers whose collections we have. We also have some collections donated from local hypnotherapist, past life regression therapist, Rabia Lynn Clark. And though we don't have Dr. Turner's collection, I bring up her in reference to our next collection. The book Taken was published and translated into many, many different languages. There was a copy of a Japanese translation there, and this was a focused book on 8 abductees, one of whom turned out to be an abductee from Austin, Texas. Next slide. Jana Ganth, who also was an artist. There's some examples of her work, at least one of which we are in possession of. And we were gifted with her personal library. And next slide. She kept voluminous daily diaries of the strange experiences and sightings that she was having. And so we have just notebook upon notebook upon notebook of her dream journal, her daily, almost daily, weekly sightings of strange phenomena. And this slide is a great example, though, of on the right there is the scribblings of her personal sighting of a UFO when she was called by the local MUFON representative and said, "Hey, we're hearing reports of a triangular lighted object over Lago Vista. Can you go out and see if you can see it from where you are?" She could. Her mother was with her. She saw it too. She took copious notes. She submitted the MUFON report that you can see up there. Now, as is the challenge with these things, many of the MUFON reports are digitized and online. You will not find that one there because it's before the time that they've managed to digitize. And then on the left there is an example of the newspaper article that came out a few days later talking about that sighting. So next slide. At the height of our organization's progress, we managed to procure some office space within this wonderful facility in downtown Austin, right there on the interstate frontage road. And we really felt we'd kind of reached a new level. Things were looking up. We had enough space to finally unpack that massive Girard collection and finish cataloging it. And we had an event space, not as grand as this, but a place that we could hold our public lectures. And it was in a prime location in central Austin, and we were trying to keep Austin weird. And then the pandemic happened. Next slide. So one of the last significant collections that we acquired is that of Bob Durant. Bob Durant was a former military and commercial aviation pilot, and who had a fascination with things like psychic remote viewing, and Ingo Svahn, whose painting you can see in the background there. And of course, he's reading a copy of Paul Smith's book, Reading the Enemy's Mind. He was very also focused on UFOs and cryptozoology. He served on the board of SITU, the Society for the Investigation of the Unexplained, a famous cryptozoology-oriented organization, and was very much a proponent of Roswell. And we received his personal book collection, or a good portion of it, as well as 5 boxes of his personal correspondence and other materials, as you've seen in other photos, boxes of home recordings, audio, and whatnot. And so we're still working on cataloging that. It's been a little difficult since the pandemic. Next slide. So before the pandemic, we tried to make these materials available through public access. We have no paid staff. It's all volunteer run, no significant budget to speak of. And we were really gaining ground, getting a lot more volunteers involved. And we tried to make those materials searchable by creating finding aids. And we're slowly getting our finding aids up on the TARO, Texas Archival Resources Online website. So that we can hopefully make it easier for folks like yourselves and others to find these materials and then come to us and gain access to them. This is incredibly difficult now, though, because as of the beginning of 2021, we have been in storage because of the pandemic. We basically lost our lease and are struggling to find our path forward. And so it is very bittersweet to be here. Next slide. But we will continue to try to do outreach as we have in the past, tabling at events that we think will have resonance. There's a science fiction film festival in Austin called Otherworlds Austin that we've tabled at and gotten really good response to. We have funded, been sponsors of, and tabled at events like Austin Archives Bazaar, and most recently did a presentation as part of the Folklore in the Archives at the University of North Texas's online streaming event, and trying to participate and get the word out about our collection at events such as this. And somehow my contact info has disappeared. Contact at anomalyarchives.org. The website is anomalyarchives.org. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much, Smiles. It was fascinating, and I did know about the existence of your archive, but I had no idea of its scope and ambition and rich history. And yeah, it's very, very informative, very illuminating. And so let me just present our last panelist, who is here in spirit, if not in person. And that is rather appropriate because the collection we'll be talking about deals mostly with spiritualist materials from the beginning of the 20th century, about 100 years ago. And this is Dr. Brian Hubner from the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, in Canada. Dr. Hubner is an archivist with the University of Manitoba Archives and the Special Collections, and he holds Master of Arts degree in History and Archival Studies from the University of Manitoba. He has presented conference papers on the relationship between the Hamilton family and Winnipeg, including the spirit photography of the T.G. Hamilton phones, valuable cultural treasure or bizarre sideshow, Winnipeg 2010, and the Hamilton Family Phones and Community Engagement, Winnipeg 2018. In December of last year, he received his PhD from the University of Amsterdam on the topic of the ghostly shadow in the archives, an archival case study of the creation and recreation of the Hamilton family phones at the University of Manitoba Archives and Special Collections. And let us now listen to Brian's video presentation.
My name is Brian Hubner, and I am an archivist at the University of Manitoba Archives and Special Collections. I'm going to talk to you today about the Hamilton collection and then move on a little bit to some of the other paranormal collections we have. Seances, levitation, and eruptions of ectoplasm are just some of the paranormal activities documented by a Canadian doctor and his wife and family in the early to mid 20th century. Between 1918 and 1935, Dr. Thomas Glendenning Hamilton and Lillian Hamilton studied paranormal activity in an upstairs room in their Winnipeg home. The Hamiltons conducted experiments that tried to use scientific methods to explore the psychic realm. In the house on Henderson Highway, T.G. Hamilton built a seance room and set up a battery of cameras to capture strange phenomena from every angle. By thoroughly documenting the techniques, the Hamiltons accumulated 1,300 pages of text and over 700 unique photos that describe and depict spirit activity. Since it has been made available to the public, the collection has become world-renowned. T.G. Hamilton was born in Ontario in 1873 and moved with his family to Winnipeg, where T.G. became a physician. With his wife, Lillian Forrester, a nurse, they had 4 children. T.G. was well known in the community, a church leader, president of the Manitoba Medical Association, an MLA, a school trustee. The seances may have begun as an attempt to contact their son Arthur, who died of Spanish flu in 1919, when only 3 years old. Although somewhat earlier, in 1918, a professor friend had introduced Hamilton to the paranormal and spiritualism, a religious movement which saw its peak in the late 1800s. By 1920, T.G. and Lillian had started their own experiments at home with the help of mediums. Their seance circle did a series of investigations related to spiritualism and took photographs of the phenomenon. Their first experiments were of telekinesis, that is moving objects with only the mind, through medium Elizabeth Poole. But their 2 most important mediums were Mary Marshall and her sister-in-law Susan Marshall, who produced ectoplasms. Soon prominent Winnipeggers were in their seance circle, including Dr. Bruce Chown and lawyer Isaac Picblado. The Hamiltons' work garnered attention from other spiritualists, including Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King, although King was not revealed as a spiritualist until after his death. Doyle is said to have returned to the Hamilton seances as a spirit. The photographs were created on glass plates from which prints were made, and then sporting documentation was created. The cameras were the technology which allowed the ghost to be seen. The most interesting photographs are those of the ectoplasms. They show mediums with white substances coming out of their mouths, and these photographs include extras. There's even a photograph of Conan Doyle in the ectoplasm. Hamilton and his family were trying to prove in what they thought was a scientific way that spirits were real and we can contact them. After his activities were revealed to the public, Hamilton gave more than 80 talks across Canada and Europe. The photographs are certainly one of the most complete collections of such investigations in the world. People have used them to create new things or gives them inspiration to create plays, novels, feature films, documentaries, academic articles, academic books, paintings. It is always surprising what they do with them. We do not know exactly how they were produced. unless they were actual manifestations of spirits. It is thought perhaps Lillian helped make the images to console her husband about their son's death. Why they created is more important. These people were trying to prove that there was something beyond our life and that we could communicate with those that had passed on. When the Hamilton Fall came into the archives in the early 1980s, there was no equivalent collection and few others in the world. Even though archivist Dr. Richard Bennett, who made the final decision, was very open to them, there was a feeling among some that they would discredit the archives and create a stigma about having such a perhaps fake collection. We are glad he took them. When we take in a similar collection to Hamilton, we take it seriously and respect it. And people see there's a space for these collections, and they are thus willing to donate. Since then, almost 50 collections have followed the Hamilton images into the archives, and more are arriving all the time. This was not even imagined in 1979 when T.G. and Lillian's daughter first came to the archives. I'm going to talk a little bit about the collections that have come into the archives after the Hamilton donation in 1979-80. Since then, about 50 collections have been donated. These range from textual materials of mediums, automatic writing, seance tapes, a whole host of artifacts, and spirit writings. And I'm just going to highlight a few of them. Of those 50, about 10 are related to the Hamiltons. That is, people, their children, grandchildren, people involved in the seances have donated, and they've really increased and strengthened the original donation. But since then, we've received many collections, often through the contact of Walter Meyer-Zuerpen or myself or Shelley Sweeney. And some of the things I'm going to highlight for you now. They include spirit stones, spirit cards, and a Ouija board, which was owned by Eileen Sykes, who was Hamilton's recorder and secretary. Material related to spiritualist churches. These are organized churches that existed and still exist in Canada. You can see there's some dowsing rods or divining apparatus here. Some of the collections are one item or one box, but we have some that are large volumes of material, like those of Dr. Bernard Grad, a Montreal professor who was involved in examining the paranormal. We have a collection of the grandfather of Dan Aykroyd, came by his father Peter Aykroyd, and many other interesting collections. And in fact, some of the most recent ones are UFO collections, and these are come through Chris Rukowski, who works with the university but is one of the leading UFO researchers in Canada, and I believe it is the second biggest collection of UFO material in Canada. So our collection is always growing and always in demand, and it's actually becoming, in some ways, although we have prairie agriculture and prairie literature, one of our featured collections.
Thank you very much, Brian, for your presentation. Well, so now we have heard from representatives of 4 very interesting, very diverse collections. And so now our discussion can now start. And we will be taking questions from the audience, but we'll also have a couple of questions to kick off our discussion with. And so I would like to to start with something that already was mentioned at the end of Amanda's presentation during that question and answer session, and that is the question of terminology. Given that there are many descriptive words we can use to describe collections of this kind, some of which can be controversial in the community of researchers and searchers, how do you make choices about description? And if any one of you would like to start off, I know that Blynne and Amanda have already spoken at medium length about it. So how about you, Smiles?
So on our board of directors and our advisory board are currently active, employed, and retired archivists, librarians, and I mainly consult with them as far as how to proceed in those kinds of arenas. The choice of our organizational name, Anomaly, was partly inspired by John Keel, a famous journalist, UFO writer, who published his own magazine of the time called Anomaly, and to me that just seemed like the most inclusive, and for some reason it really appealed to me. So early on I just decided to go with that as kind of an overarching catch-all for the wide variety of categories. This kind of gets to the conversation I was having last night, and that is a recurring theme of people when they talk about contact experiences, whether they be called alien abduction or experiencer or even encontrant, I think was prevalent for a brief period of time. These terminologies obviously can have a significant effect on how people are able to find this material. I've also, in trying to find ways to categorize our collections internally, defaulted to trying to find how has it been done before, and AFU's Fin Code is one of those resources that I found helpful.
Yeah, the Fin Code is something that we had to invent because having 55,000 books on different subjects makes it a little difficult to use the ordinary library system. So we started to build this Fin Code, and if you're interested, we are describing that at afu.se. But from the beginning, AFU was the acronym for Archives for UFO Research, that Smiles indicated. But of course, after some years, we saw that we needed to broaden that acronym. So in the end now, we are called Archives for the Unexplained, since we are very, very broad in what we collect. We collect everything from, as I said, William Corley's collection of unusual natural phenomena to paranormal stuff, Atlantis, automatic writing, and UFOs, and anything and everything you don't understand, you can find at AFU. And if you're interested to read about it, I have this book I wrote about AFU with me. If you want to take a look or buy it, it's online as well. But we haven't had no big problems with calling us AFU or Unexplained or UFO in the end. People are finding us, and we have a very good reputation for taking care of files and material. So I think what we are being called today is really encompasses what we would like to be in the future.
Thank you, Clas. And let me also read here the answer to the same question from Brian Hubner, which he has sent to us. Unfortunately, Brian was not able to make it to Houston, so he is participating in this remote way. We most often use the term psychical, but also paranormal or parapsychology to describe these materials. If a donor uses the term to describe a collection, we genuinely respect it. Hamilton's investigations were often considered in the context of spiritualism, although he or his family were not spiritualists themselves. Most often it has pointed out to us to use these terms carefully, as the formal spiritualist churches in the spiritualist movement of the 19th century was not connected with Hamilton. Because his photographs are also not ghost of spirit photos, which were largely created in the mid-19th century in the United States, England, and France. So it seems to me, in general, especially relying on responses from, keeping in mind responses from Clas and Smiles, and also Blynne, and also our own experience with, renaming archives of the paranormal, right? Archives of the impossible. There seems to be a drift that I perceive from more particular, more specific to more general, and an attempt to cover more areas, to use broader terms. So that to underscore the fact or the supposition that all of these phenomena are in some way connected. And does anybody on the panel or maybe in the audience have any remarks about this? Yes, I have a question right here in the second row.
Thank you. It's not a question, it's more of a comment. In the narrow slice of research parapsychology, which some of you know I've been involved with most of my career, it's been a topic of discussion dating back as far as 1940 when J.B. Ryan published his book about 60 years of parapsychology, struggling with the exact same issue. Part of the problem, I think broadly so, is that we don't have positive definitions of our phenomena. When we figure out what ESP actually is, instead of a whole long list of things it isn't, then I think that the nomenclature will come very clear.
Thank you. And that actually brings to my mind the ongoing discussions in physics about the nature of dark matter, and dark energy, which actually nobody knows what it is. And it's like a placeholder term for something to be hopefully discovered in the future. A question right there. Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
So two different things. The first one is kind of responding to Ed. Well, in general, part of the problem here with these phenomena is that they are of different ontologies, right? They're constructed, or they may exist from out of different natures. So ESP isn't the same thing as UFO phenomena of various descriptions. There's some increasingly becoming a bit doubtful, but the idea that UFOs are probably a concrete, physical kind of a thing, whereas ESP may not be concrete and physical, right? And so when you try and come up with a term that captures all of these things, that's where the trouble comes, right? Because you're trying to throw a whole bunch of kind of an eclectic set of things together and come up with one descriptor. Well, that's why we're having trouble, right? The other thing is, it's probably better handled offline, but I can't resist the opportunity of getting two of the people I need to talk to together and not have to hunt them down individually, right? So first off, Blynne, you guys have got Janet Mitchell's archives. I have about 5 or 6 boxes of her back issues of all her old parapsychology publications, that she collected over time, and she didn't send them to you guys because she didn't think you wanted them. Do you want them?
I'm glad you brought that up. Not to drift too far from our discussion about terminology, which I think is really important. One thing that we make a decision of in special collections is we spend and invest a lot of time in preserving and collecting these primary source materials. And I probably don't need to cover all the parameters of what that involves, but temperature, humidity controlled storage, the security of our storage, staffing, expertise, long-term management, all of those components feed into our kind of cost matrix for preserving and providing public access to these materials. So materials that are published, other than our rare books, rare maps, rare ephemera collections, that's one thing. But things like article reprints, we do not collect because people can find them elsewhere.
Okay, so that was a kind of an extended no, is that it?
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right, and it's really looking at that cost and the value to researchers long term. No,
I get you. Yeah, good. My wife will be disappointed that we can't get those boxes out of our garage, but still, right? Okay, because I have a hard time throwing something that away.
I will say that, like with the Carlos S. Alvarado, who studied out-of-body experiences as well as a few other topics, with his papers we just acquired, I was on site for a week working with those papers. And what is the danger of winnowing out those materials, because for decades he requested reprints of articles through ILL, when he was at UVA in the medical school. I mean, decades and decades and dollars worth of ILL reprints that he had sent to him. He even saved the receipts for those. Is that then what you lose is that intellectual train of what he was reading in order to formulate his thoughts. So we do lose that. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those very difficult choices of we must clean that out and narrow it down. It's really, it is a difficulty. It is a conundrum. And that's why in our finding aids with Alvarado papers, we'll have a note that over 16 boxes of article reprints were winnowed out of the Alvarado papers that were embedded and integral to his research files, but that didn't warrant retention because we are providing very expensive space to original primary source materials.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. Okay, so I'll try and make this very brief. I don't want this to grow into my hand here, but
I would just say that we would love to have them. We don't have that problems.
okay, but that involves international shipping, right?
Don't ship it.
I'll have that conversation with you then. Okay.
Do that.
This has to do with Bob Durant's archives. As Miles knows, he and I kind of worked together and divided them up. He got the UFO stuff, and I got the Ingo Svahn remote viewing stuff. And I think I talked to you, Blynne, about maybe me passing them on to you guys.
Right.
Okay. So just the one suggestion is, I'm a little bit concerned that you guys are only in storage right now, Miles, and I think you are too, right?
Very concerned.
If it should happen that your archives have to be dissolved, I hope you two work out an arrangement so that she can get Bob's UFO stuff. Okay?
Yes, yes, thank you so
Okay,
much.
good,
Yes.
thank you.
This raises an important, you can probably continue this conversation together with Clas and Smiles and Blynne after the conclusion of this panel, but this raises an extremely important topic of the future of archives and challenges faced by both public institutions and privately held archives, just the different types of challenges, each of which contribute to, just pressure on these materials. And I can see, from the institutional perspective, very often, the trustees, the people in power, don't really want us to acquire these collections. As Brian said, it was considered. People looked down on the Hamilton funds when they were first acquired in the 1980s. And there was also a lot of suspicion, I'm sure, a lot of pressure on the University of West Georgia archives, right? So we had to tread carefully. On the other hand, we do have the space mostly, and we have the funding, and we have the staff. But the private institutions, on the other hand, always have to be mindful of these challenges. So in the case of Smiles, we have the Anomaly Archives in Austin. Now there is no location for actually displaying these collections and doing work. And from what I understand, the AFU in Sweden has dispersed locations in over a dozen areas.
Well, it's on the same street, so
They're all on the same street.
it's 15 localities on the same street. And I mean, we have chosen to be funded by donators, around 50 or 55 people who are putting money into every month to run AFU, which is a very good decision, I think, because if we lose some, we can find some more. And we also sell surplus. We are collecting a second copy of every book in the library. The third one we are selling through AFU Bookshop. You can buy very scarce and very hard to find things, and that makes up for the rent every month. So I think we are very safe for the future, and we would love to have one locality, everything under one roof, of course. That's the aim. And maybe before I'm turning in, I will try to solve that.
So you are not in any way supported by the Swedish government?
No, not at all.
I heard a presentation by an institution based in the Netherlands called Stiftung Het Borgman Fonds, and that is an institution which collects archives from private holders, from people, and then does not actually store them, but places them in the government-owned libraries and archives in the Netherlands, and I think maybe also neighboring countries, and that is supported by the government. So, our funding situations is always, different fluent and influx, and I'm happy that things are going well with a few.
We are too.
Yes. Any other remarks from anybody?
I'll just add, because you mentioned the University of West Georgia. So as a public institution in the state of Georgia, of which many of you are probably aware of kind of the political context of Georgia, one of the things that I explain is the importance of asking questions, and that this, as within our academic setting, the importance of discourse and asking those questions and building curiosity in students. So that's something I position very carefully, and that's also kind of the terminology for the collections as well, kind of those human consciousness collections. And I think that one thing that helps with an academic setting is sort of that funding infrastructure and that intellectual structure. And me as a faculty member, thankfully, having the intellectual freedom of a faculty member, and I'm striving to help preserve that, particularly in times when tenure is under threat all across the United States in public institutions. And even now in Georgia, as in other state legislatures, you know, as professors were even questioned about, and even K through 12 educators are questioned about, you can't mention the history of white supremacy or patriarchy in the United States, nothing that could be perceived as divisive or and these are very difficult times, and I think that positioning ourselves in terms of that right to question and the right to dialogue about these things is really, I think, a fundamental part of my job, not only for our human consciousness collections, but for our political collections, our university archives, which are rife with, our university was founded on a plantation, you know, that students and every scholar and member of the public who uses our collections should have the right to view these materials and to discuss them.
Thank you very much, Blynne, and that actually leads me very well into our next question, which is the broad subject of dangerous archives. And that involves cancel culture, censorship, and perceived abuses of archival collections and manipulation of beliefs towards terrible ends. And so would anybody else would like to contribute to any of these topics?
I think that was my question. And just to lead from the previous one, I would cite the oral history clip that you played of Jacques talking about the dangers of even institutions deciding on a whim that these collections no longer are valid. And I'd have no idea what the legal pursuit would be to protect them. I assume those discussions have been had here. But yeah, the question of dangerous archives and cancel culture, obviously there's, with attempts to ban books, this idea of trying to suppress information that people largely don't even know about or understand because they won't actually read the material that they're trying to ban is dangerous. There's a rhetoric professor, Jenny Rice, who wrote a book called Awful Archives that was brought to my attention because we're mentioned in it. Thankfully, not necessarily as being an example of an awful archive, but the scope of her work is very interesting. There's a number of moments where she talks about the archiving urge and principles and likens some of them to Nazi Germany and the horrors that were perpetrated in the name of science and cataloging and things of that nature. And it's the kind of thing I don't know exactly how to start a conversation about that, but given the climate that we're in and the actual possible dangers of people getting access to material, the lists of contactees, abductees that wrote to Whitley. Obviously, the protections that you've put in place in terms of moratorium of time and the restrictions on use are important, because data can be harvested for purposes that go in directions that none of us want to see. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at with that question, and I do not have the answers to that. But I think it should be part of the conversation.
Thank you so much, Smiles. And Amanda can tell us about the steps that we have taken to safeguard the identity of the people, for example, the writers of the letters in the Shparberg collection.
I would say that is a process that we're still undergoing. It is accessible, and we have conversations with researchers about not using the personally identifiable information of the writers. Is it possible that there would be bad actors out there abusing the information? Yes, there's always that risk. There's personally identifiable information just everywhere in archives. You can't redact every single piece of that kind of information. So we try to strike a balance between the greater good of providing access and that risk that somebody might do something that we would consider a bad action with the information. It's risk tolerance. It's something that we discuss with the donors individually about their collections. And so we try to make those terms of access clear in the guides to the collections, but it's always challenging and always imperfect, I would say.
I mean, protecting witnesses is one of our biggest problems, I should say. We have 60,000 UFO reports. Every single one of them has a witness name, address, other facts. And people are demanding that we are putting as much as we can online for free. Everything should be free, of course. But doing this and making this accessible without hurting all those informers, it's impossible. So we must do this redaction before we can put them online. But people are eager to see and not to pay and think that we are running this as a free lunch. No, it is a problem. It really is a problem. And we are writing copyright agreements with lots of people when we are publishing those UFO magazines, which are loads of them online on a AFU download. All of them that are accessible there, we have copyright agreements with the publisher. We have at least as many 5 terabytes more that are not online, but are scanned, that we cannot publish because of those rules.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Clas. Yeah, are there any questions from the audience about the dangerous archives and preserving confidentiality? All right, thank you very much. So let's just move on to, before I move on to our next question, I just wanted to mention that we put up an exhibit, a physical exhibit in Fondren Library dedicated to the archives, which Amanda and I heartily recommend to you to view. It's a short walk, maybe like a 5-10 minute walk from here to the library. But we were faced with the problem of hiding the identities of letter writers. So in the Whitley Shparberg case, we selected a letter where we took pains to screen the signature and the name, any identifying characteristics. And actually, I wanted to mention this because this letter, even though the majority of letters are from the United States, but this one actually came from Sweden. And it includes a very nice picture of the UFO sighting that this witness had in the Swedish countryside. So
nice.
Yes. Yeah. So the next question that comes up. Oh yeah, and by the way, let me just quickly read the response from Brian Hubner. This has not really been an issue for us to date. We know some Hamilton images have been used in semi-pornographic ways on the internet, but we have not interfering with this. Or should we? That's the question. So moving on to the next topic, we have a question about the nature of artifacts. And artifacts often come as part of paranormal donations, such as seance tables, spirit stones, dowsing rods, Ouija boards, photographic equipment, and such. And we are not a museum, and so have a great deal of difficulty properly storing, exhibiting, and keeping safe in proper environment conditions. And so I would like to invite contributions from our panelists. That was your question, Blynne, right? Was it?
I don't know. I had a lot of questions. To respond, we do have artifactual items associated with collections. With the William G. Roll papers, some of his experimentation boards along with Zehner cards and things like that. And with Ingo's papers, also with their some things, artifacts related to the practice of Scientology. And so I think it's just bound into the nature of our collections. Large things like couches, can't take. So it has to, I have to make decisions based on what we can reasonably care for. We aren't a museum, and so we do not have that kind of preservation expertise with textiles, metals, bones, la la la. You know, our expertise as archivists and librarians are in paper, film-based materials, and digital files. But nonetheless, some of those artifacts are really part and parcel of those archival collections and end up helping students and users really understand the collections much better. And when I often start teaching about our human consciousness collections with students, a wonderful thing to start with is the box of bent spoons from the William G. Roll papers. And that immediately gives students a visual understanding of the power of the mind and PK and his experiments that he was running.
Thank you. I believe we also have spoons bent by Uri Geller, right? Yeah, but we could not put them on display from what I remember. Amanda?
Yes, yes, we do. And we didn't wind up putting those out. And we do also struggle with storage of materials and proper preservation of those kinds of other materials. So large items we usually do wind up having to say no to, same as in your experience. But we do like to have some of them because I agree they're wonderful teaching tools. They're wonderful items to put out in exhibits. And so, you know, you may not consider them as strong research materials, but they are also, I mean, they really are important outreach and like inspiration tools. So they're things that we use to get people's attention and bring them in to start using the rest of the archives.
Can I jump back in for 1 minute? What I have found in my experience is that tools are an incredibly important component of this field, and it is, you almost can't separate it out. So we also have the Cleve Baxter papers and some of the tools that he used in his experiments with his plants. And so the tools, I think the measurement tools are just almost so integral that they cannot be separated out.
We keep quite a lot of artifacts connected to UFO sightings. People have found metallic debris or crop circle artifacts when you are trying to douse a crop circle. And we have this wonderful police jacket from Alan Godfrey. He was the first policeman to be abducted in Great Britain. Who knows? But we keep that. And as you saw in my presentation, there are lots of toys and models and other things. We have thousands of artifacts. And I would like them to be much better taken care of course, but we do as good as we can. And we do display them from time to time. This year, in the end of May, we will display maybe 100 of them in an exhibition in Norrköping, where the archives are situated. But we would love to have a museum, which we don't have the money for right now.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to say one more thing. Also, I think that there's that associational, they're tools, but they're also strong associative values, because William G. Roll had this theory about the long body, like the items, it can be a physical item in your life, whatever, that you actually as an individual develop actually an association with this item that is very comprehensive and deep. And so some of these artifacts are closely associated with these individuals. And so it's almost like that consciousness question about terminology. I mean, so it's not just human consciousness, or maybe it is, or a greater consciousness beyond humans that actually connects in with even an artifact, an item.
Great, thank you. Smiles, do you have a...
We've not received much in the way of artifacts. The closest thing to the UFO-themed artifacts in the form of toys, like as represented in AFU, yeah, people give those things to me. I've never asked for them, but they're like, oh, you're the UFO guy. So I've ended up with that material, and I'm like, yes, let's put it in the archive, but it's not really part of the collection officially. We treat it as ephemera. We're not trying to be a long-term museum to protect that stuff, but it begs the question of there's so many more hoops to jump through to qualify as a accredited museum. I mean, archiving papers and books is hard enough as it is, so we're not yet in a position to do that.
That is so. And Brian says, we try and genuinely discourage artifact donations, but some are just too interesting not to take in donation or come part and parcel of one, as you said, Brian. We just store them at best as we're able in climate-controlled conditions which exist in our rare book vault. These items can be, of course, very useful for display, and we don't have a ready solution to this. So it looks like just with you, they just come, whether you ask for them or not, they just try to make their way in. All right, well, thank you very much. So we have about 4-5 minutes left, and so we can take questions from the audience for any of the panelists on any topic. So please let us know if you have any questions. Yes, I have a question right up there.
So, of course, we're living in a digital age now, and I know on my job, I pull out the letterhead maybe twice a year. So my question is, what is the future of archiving, especially when there aren't actual artifacts?
It's always important to keep the original documents, of course, and scanning and make them available. But the problem I see is that it's very hard to get people's computers, their emails. When they are passing, the relatives are maybe not giving us the computers. Sometimes I get them to send the hard drives, but it's sometimes very difficult to access their emails, which is, of course, much easier when you're writing a letter, if you keep a copy. That is one of my biggest problems, really, how to preserve that. And of course, there are different formats that change over time, which you must also adjust to, which is a huge undertaking, which we are trying to do. But we are sitting there with floppy disks, not easy. And diskettes, not easy anymore.
Thank you, Clas. Amanda?
That is a really, really great question. It's a big challenge because it's easy to come across a cedar chest with letters tied up with ribbon or journals. Those things are stable formats that are going to sit there and can wait for you to find them in another 100 years, mostly. Digital formats are definitely challenging because usually, unless they're publicly accessible already, somebody's email account is a great example. You need to have permission to get to that. So somebody needs to have thought ahead of time that they want you to have that and talk to you about it. So we do try to do some outreach with people about personal archiving and making plans for your digital afterlife. It is possible to preserve someone's entire email account and provide access to it. And we have a lot of digital tools, but you have to have the stuff. We have legacy media tools to capture content off of floppy disks and zip drives and different kinds of things, and we do that, and we preserve it in our dark archive. unless they're things that make sense to put online publicly. But just getting the things in the first place is a big deal, and really, so you might get someone's computer, yes, okay, but then do you also have their email password and all those things? It really requires a conversation ahead of time. And sometimes people intend to do that, but they leave before they get to it, or all sorts of reasons why that can be challenging. So it's a big challenge.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for just one more quick question. Anyone? Anyone? Okay, all right. You? Please.
Following up on Blynne's question earlier about, or Blynne's comment earlier about the connection between people and objects, just a general question, have any of you had any unexplained events in your collections? In or around your collections, physical or digital?
I haven't, but I'm going to be on the lookout extra.
Well, things are vanishing, you know. You keep looking for them for quite a while, and sometimes they turn up.
Mostly just the personal experience that I think most folks have had at one point of experiencing synchronicity in the form of the library angel, where you're walking through the stacks, and that book that you need to find that has the thing you need to find in it falls off and opens to the page, and there's the thing you're looking for. Is that a ghost? Is that your guardian? Is that just luck?
All of these things.
I agree with that. Yeah, I've had that. Yeah, I think so, definitely.
Well, thank you very much. And so with this great question, I think this is the perfect conclusion to our library panel. But I'm sure that your questions are not exhausted, and I did see several hands up. So I'm sorry we could not accommodate. But you're always welcome to continue these conversations with our panelists after the conclusion of the panel. And thank you very much again.